how COVID-19 changed external development, all right? The COVID-19 pandemic changed everything. External development didn't go unblemished. Yeah, that's right. In the session, developers from Glu Mobile, Technicolor Games, 31st Union Studio, and Lionbridge Games will help you understand what changed, strengths and weaknesses that came with this change, and what to expect from this new moment for global game development. All right, so this session is in English, so if you want to listen to it in Portuguese, please access the link here in our channel. All right, so let's welcome moderator first, Casey O'Connor, Director of Outside Services of Glu Mobile. How are you, Cassie?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for coming. It's such a pleasure to have you and such nice women representing us in the industry. I'm going to introduce you as well. Christy Scanlon, VP and Business Development of Technicolor Games. Louis Wang, Game Content Production, Distributed Development, Art Outsourcing Professional at 31st Union Studio. And Priscilla Heza, Sir Director, Global Strategic Accounts of Lionbridge Games and Entertainment. That's great. Thank you all for coming. It's such a pleasure to have you here. The screen now is yours.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending our panel. As mentioned, I am Cassie O'Connor, and I have the great privilege to host this amazing panel of all women in games, which is always so exciting to do. Not only have I worked with each of these people individually and on teams, but they're also dear friends of mine. So on our panel, we will discuss kind of like the past and present. So kind of like what happened when COVID hit, how us and our teams adapted to going from work from home, our processes, how they changed, etc. And then we'll look at going forward, like what does the future of external development look like? Because we know that nothing is going to be the same. So to start off, we will go ahead and just kind of go over each of us from the developer and the vendor side on how we adapted to COVID-19, the pandemic, when it hit. So I will turn it over to Priscilla to go first.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Cassie. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So yes, I mean, as we all know, when the pandemic hit, it was something very unusual, shocking. So something we obviously didn't expect. It was very challenging for all of us, both on a personal level and professional level, because things just kind of changed from one day to the next, right? On a personal level, just briefly mentioning being a single mom and having a 7-year-old, it was kind of rough because I had to switch from, obviously dropping off my daughter to school and having her, she had her day with her friends and all of that, to having her at home. So being kind of her best friend, her teacher, and everything here. And at the same time, trying to juggle, work life as well. So it was very challenging indeed, but we're pretty much settled into our routine now, which is really nice. But speaking about work, one of the things that I really wanted to mention was I wanted to really thank all of our or my client partners. I think the developers and the publishers were really amazing, kind of going from that transition to what was our regular workflow to trying to navigate COVID-19. One of the first things that people would ask me, which I thought was really great, was, okay, how are you going to keep your people safe, right? Let's make sure, obviously we want to do our job and at the best of our abilities, but we want to hear about how you're going to keep the testers safe, the actors safe, the employees. How are you guys doing? So that was something that was really heartwarming, I thought, just to kind of hear that from our partners, and also internally within Lionbridge. That was a huge part of our transition through navigating COVID, was just making sure that everybody was safe. And I'd say, being in the localization industry, Localization, for example, already has a work from home model, so that was really unaffected. The challenges that we did have mostly around localization were, changes trying to get people to work from home for QA and then also for audio as well. Um, and then obviously a huge importance was to keep the IP of our partners safe, right? So security was a huge deal. So one of the things that we did, we're a global company, right? We're all over. We have many different offices throughout Europe and Asia, different studios. So each studio kind of put together their business continuity plan. So how to transition, right? From like, here we are in lockdown or, getting close to lockdown. We really have to move quickly before, it actually got to that point of being locked down. So the teams put some really great plans in place for QA and for audio. So kudos to them, 100% amazing people. And so for each of our clients, we met with them and said, okay, we know that we have these projects in the pipeline. We don't want there to be a disruption from, getting the work done. So these are some options that we're looking at to kind of make sure that we continue to service like the QA, and audio was a little more challenging, but so this is what we're putting in place. These are our thoughts. What do you think? Are these security protocols? Does this work for you? What are your thoughts? Please, let's work together to make sure that we make this happen. So a lot of training also of the, personnel, like let's make sure, right, we are using best practices, like keep best practices in place for work from home. Don't forget our confidentiality agreements with our clients, right? We don't want anything leaking. So just a lot of work behind the scenes and alongside with our clients to make sure that everything kept moving forward while keeping everybody safe. So overall, it went pretty smoothly, I would have to say. Obviously there are going to be a few hiccups because COVID hit certain areas harder, while other areas, was a little easier to work with. So a lot of moving parts, but we've been able to make it work. It was pretty successful.
Hey, thanks, Priscilla. And yes, big
Sure.
shout out to those who had to work from home and have kids, like to manage both of that. That's incredible. Like, it's just amazing what people have been able to accomplish this year. So next, we're gonna hear the point of view from Christy.
Sure. So our studio is in Bangalore, India. I'm based in Los Angeles. I've been with the company for 9.5 years. I'm in charge of business development for the animation and games group. So while I was able to just kind of pack up my laptop and go home and work at my dining room table, things were much more difficult to get hundreds of artists in India up and running working from home. They were on a pretty strict lockdown immediately, the whole country. So we had to get government passes to even access the building. We had to make sure that our employees at home had high-speed internet. We had to make sure that we had the bandwidth, the pipe in and out of the studio, physically packing up systems and deploying them to artists' homes. Priscilla talked a bit about how we had to get a security plan in place, get our clients to approve it, get legal documents into place, train the artists on this. Every artist had to have 2 workstations, one at home and one in the studio. So they would remote desktop into the system in the studio. So we had to get approval to get double systems for everybody. And it took time. It took a couple of months. And then once we started to kind of basically get a handful of people up and running, then gradually more and more, so that by about the summer, we were at full capacity working from home. And as the restrictions have kind of shifted over time, we've had some training in the office, or if there's a project that's starting up that needs special attention, but we've always kept the footprint in the office to below 15%, I think. Now India is on full lockdown again. So everybody is working from home. And we're taking every step that we can to keep our employees safe. That's of course the #1 priority. But our clients have been amazing and understanding and supportive. We're very appreciative of how the partnerships have been so strong.
Right. That's wonderful to hear that partnerships. I think that's the biggest thing is just everyone has to work together on this. And now we're going to hear from Lois on the developer point of view.
Hi, I'm Lois. Well, my personal journey of this whole COVID situation actually is quite unique. So what happened is, right before I'm based in San Francisco, so right before California, San Francisco proceed with the lockdown, I was actually in the process of interviewing with this new studio, and then I got the offer letter a week before the whole lockdown happened. So the journey was quite different because immediately from I've met very small amount of the team members and getting a very, very high level introduction of the studio. And then it immediately switched into the team is packing up, working from home. We're not entering to the offices. And I was the first person onboarding remotely with my team. And as a senior producer, I'm actually one of the two senior producer. We're supposed to be owning half of the operation of the project. And the very interesting part that while I was preparing for this remote working scenario, I asked myself, like, throughout my career, I've worked with the external development team, working on the server side and working as a developer. What would I do to start building my relationship with a remote team? How do I work? How do I used to work with my service provider? And then how do I apply that practice to work with people supposedly in the same office, but now we're having a very different setting. So that's kind of like how I enter to the COVID impact and pandemic. And I use all the best practice that I know of how to establish report system or how to establish, like, how do you ask question, how do you get to know the team in order to first warm up with the team that you're going to work in a daily basis. And then you're also responsible of managing their well-being and at the same time is facilitating with all the project decisions. So that was a very interesting take because you don't always use the same method to work with internal developer versus remote team because your local developer team, they may not have the language barrier, they may not have the technology differences because you're sitting next to each other. And yet now we do. Everyone have a different setting in the home office. It can be you have a dedicated room, it can be with the pets running around, and then you have, very scattered schedule to support between work and life. So there's a lot of different scenarios that we are kind of just rolling with the punches and, kind of like finding solution with the team together. So that was one thing that was super interesting. Even as a developer, we started to apply some of the mentality that how we used to work with remote team or distributed development team to apply to supposedly on one location team in the game development. Yeah.
Thanks, Lois. And I think you make a really good point there that us in external development, it's almost like we had an edge or because we're so used to working with a bunch of different remote teams all at once in different countries, different time zones. So we understood like how to incorporate that into our team. And I think a lot of us kind of brought that to the table with our own internal teams. Like, this is what we have had to deal with before, and we kind of have an idea how to do so. So now that we've kind of went over of like how we dealt with the pandemic when it first happened, obviously this is going to be part of our lives probably for the long run. It's changed everything. When we think about it being like about 14 months or so, sometimes it seems way longer than that. But obviously for years to come, this is still going to be part of it. Like, I don't think anything is going to go back to exactly how it was before. So we want to discuss like what external development is going to look like going forward. And for most of us who are in this industry and especially in external development, travel has been huge. Like most of us are on the road constantly, like whether it's conferences, doing a vendor visit, visiting a developer, going to different studios, like we're all have a heavy travel-based schedule. And for a year and a half, none of us have been on a plane. And so we kind of want to discuss that. Like, obviously, the game industry has still done very well, and projects are getting out. Games are being shipped, but yet we haven't had to travel. So the question is like, how important is travel going forward? Do we still need to travel to do successful external development? So to start off, I think we're going to have Priscilla start and give her point of view on this.
Well, thank you for the question. That's a really good question. I personally love to travel. I love to travel to meet with my clients. I mean, the last trip I took right before COVID hit, in February, I went to Quebec to meet one of my clients, and it was super fun. There was this wild snowstorm as well, so it made it very interesting. But I'd say there are pros and cons. I mean, I'm speaking from a business perspective, right? Meeting with my clients who are developers and publishers. I mean, I would give a little bit of props to Zoom. It's been pretty interesting to kind of see. Get to know people a little bit on a different level. You kind of see what's in their home, right? You see I think somebody mentioned their pets walking behind them, or you get to meet their family as well. That's also really nice. That's not something you would normally see, right? When you meet them in person at the office or over lunch or dinner at a conference. But there really is nothing like getting to meet people face to face and kind of building that relationship. Part of my job is to build relationships with people. So I say it's probably going to be, my prediction is probably going to be kind of like a mix of both. I really do like using Zoom and those platforms to see people rather than just doing like your traditional conference call. But I do miss going on the road and traveling and meeting with my clients and kind of having those in-person connections. So I really hope that doesn't go away.
Thanks, Priscilla. Christy, do you think external development can be successful without travel?
I think it can be, but I don't think it should be. So once we got through the first few months of transitioning to working from home and the crisis of all of that, I remember having a moment in the summer where I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do my job now? Because I would get most of my leads from conferences and from going to see clients and things like that. And so I was like, how am I going to do my job? And then I think, there's a conference called External Development Summit, which was virtual in the fall. And my takeaway from that was I had roughly the same amount of meetings. So from a business perspective, I did get what I needed out of my meetings. But what was really missing was the social aspect, running into a friend in the hall and talking to people who are friends, but not exactly clients, like competitors or people in other aspects of the business, trading information, building those relationships, having those client dinners. And I think that having put in 9.5 years of at the time, I guess it was 8 years, having put in 8 years of doing that, luckily the relationships were strong going into the pandemic, and the foundation was already there. But without that, for new clients, you don't really have that personal connection in the same way. So, I worry that people won't go back to traveling all the time and going to conferences, but I think that would be a mistake, because I think, like Priscilla said, there's no substitute for FaceTime and for having those in-person interactions. So I really, really hope, I miss the social aspect. I miss going to the conferences and seeing everybody. So I really hope that some degree of that will go back to normal.
And if I can jump in really quick, I think people are really craving that too. I mean, I know speaking with my clients, they're like, oh, we can't wait to see you again. And I'm like, I can't wait to go visit you. Yeah, I think we're craving that. Yeah, that COVID fatigue definitely is there.
100%. Like I said, you guys are not only colleagues, but you guys are my friends. And I'm so used to seeing you guys multiple times a year, and it's just not there anymore. So I can't wait till we can meet in person and grab that drink and just, catch up on life. to go back, Lois, when we were kind of putting this panel together, you actually brought up a really interesting point about the concept of time and how our time management skills have changed. Can you talk a little bit more on that?
Yeah. So I think it's a very interesting thing that I'm seeing for multiple aspects because right now I'm working with developers. So I have a really wide range of age group and sort of like family structure that within my team. Couple of different aspects that I'm seeing. It's one is we started to use much more scatter time, and then your life and work is no longer this 8 hours for work and then the rest of the time is personal. There's a lot of that in and out sort of transitioning from, hey, I really need to run an errand for an hour, okay, I need to make lunches, and then making sure I need to support my kids for dancing class, for example. One of my developers doing that, right? And you started to kind of managing your time in a very different way. It is a challenge. I think there are some really positive aspect towards to it because it allow you to maximize your effort from both ends. I have developer tell me that one of the best thing they experience in this work from home situation, it's kind of the blessing, in disguise, is they actually get to have dinner or lunch even with their teenager kids, which is actually really rare if they were working in a very fixed hour, or you have to commute and do kind of managing your time differently. There are also a layer of that complexity of how do you transition between these two aspects of your life. Some of the folks might be a little bit struggling with, so when do I stop? My computer is right over there. And then I see people ask me questions. So do I answer it right now or do I answer it tomorrow morning? And how does that impact, myself or my rest of the team? And I think there is so many different aspects that it's kind of an ongoing, evolving process because we don't have the best answer. And I think each day, at least, myself or my team, we're really trying to explore the possibilities and then also managing some of the transition or some of the negative side of it to kind of course correct according to this whole process. Yeah.
Yep, 100%. Myself, like, I actually was working from home 3 years before the pandemic happened. So I had a pretty good grasp on the work from home situation, but it's not easy. Like, anyone who thought that people working from home were sitting in their pajamas eating bonbons was sorely mistaken. Like, you definitely have to have that balance between the two. And actually, we have a little bit of time, but going forward, this is for all panelists. Do you think you can go back to being in the office full time, or have you been in this long enough where you just you're going to need that hybrid model of having the choice to go in or not to the office? Christy, I'll ask you first that one.
Well, for me, I don't have a choice because I don't have an office anymore. So my company sold part of its business it was announced in January, and along with it, a lot of their real estate. So the building where my office had been, as of last week, actually, is now under new ownership. So as soon as I found that out, I was like, well, I just can't keep on this way, because I spent a year working at my dining room table, and similar to what Lois was saying, like there's no division. You're still reading your emails while you're having breakfast and everything else. And so I just decided I can't do this anymore. I need to have a home office. So a year to the day, actually, of when we all went on lockdown, I moved into a 2-bedroom, and now I have a home office, which has been life-changing because I was getting a lot of back problems from sitting in a chair that you're not supposed to be sitting in all day. So now I have a proper desk and a proper laptop stand and a proper chair. And not only is it better for me physically and mentally, I can kind of leave this room and go have lunch and not be looking at my emails while I'm eating my lunch. So having the home office was really important for me in this transition. But what I miss so much is just being able to walk down the hall and ask a question, or sit on a couch in someone's office and catch up. And so I've been really mourning that, and trying to figure out how to replace that, because that social aspect of having lunch with your colleagues or just chatting, by the water cooler, so to speak, like it's, I really, really miss that a lot. But I'll be working from home permanently now, so I'll be getting used to it.
Yeah, I think that is hard. Luckily, like my company, what we've started implementing is like monthly happy hours or events. Like we've had escape rooms that everyone goes online and like competes against each other. Like we share Animal Crossing, codes and things like that. We have art classes. So I think, shout out to all those who plan events for companies, because you've had to be really creative this year on how to get everyone involved, but yet everyone is still remotely. And I have to say, for me, being someone who's worked from home for years, that I have actually met more of my coworkers during the pandemic than I had beforehand, because everyone was in an office and I was one of the few that were remote. So now that everyone was remote, I'm going to the events and I'm actually meeting people who I've never got to meet before. So for me, that was like a perk. So Priscilla, what about you? Do you think you can go back to normal office life?
I've actually, just like you, Cassie, I've been working from home for many years. It's not uncommon for those of us in localization to work remotely. Um, I think, and I love working from home, to be honest, because it does give me that flexibility. I think just like Lois was saying, like, go, take my daughter and pick her up and all that stuff, and I still get my job done. But, there are, I just mostly miss the traveling. Like that was my catch up with my colleagues and catch up with my clients, and where I had a chance to be social at the conferences. But just like Christy said, it's so important to have your own space, your home office. Thankfully, I purchased a home last year where now I have my own home office. I'm so happy. Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of I'm not going back to the office because I was remote for a while already. But yeah.
And Lois, I've known you for many years, and you live in the Bay Area, which everyone who lives there has that lovely commute, no matter where you live. So, what about you? Do you think you could ever go back to the office and riding BART, or
Oh man,
crazy commute?
there there's so much layers to it. I will first say that, like, one, I'm seeing the work from home model because of the COVID kind of really pushing us to have this transition. Couple of really interesting aspect that really shows up. One, many of my developer tell me, like, the commute, no commute has been amazing. They at least gain like maybe 2 hours extra a day, and so they can actually do something different. And on the on the other hand, like even some of my folks also started to have a little bit better understanding of how to, like, I wouldn't even say, like, I think it's just embracing the fact or understanding further about the collaboration between in-house developer versus external developer. Some people also identify like, oh, so this is how remote communication works, because it is the biggest direct challenge for, like on-site developer is you can no longer just go and then look at someone's screen and understanding what the goal is or direction or everyone's progress. Everything needs to be scheduled, so you can actually hop onto a Zoom call and then you can see each other's things, or so and so's check-in is not here, so you cannot work on something else. The level of coordination really changes people's aspect of how things work. And then they also, I think in to some extent, is you're also appreciating a different process, different challenges, and be more thoughtful to collaborate with people working remotely. Um, that extended to the external partner. I think this is something a little bit wider impact that I'm seeing, because usually we have the working culture is like, the people who work very, very closely with your external partner, I think they, throughout the years, they already adapt and then they have a very good rhythm to collaborate with external partner, but they're also a part of the team. They may not really know what does that mean when you work with people in a different time zone, different offices, because they are not directly experiencing that. But because of the COVID and then the work from home situation really exposed it into something that we may not be entirely comfortable, but we kind of have to, like reinforce this and then trying to find solutions. So I think those are really interesting. And then for me personally is I did move during the pandemic because both my husband and I work in game industry and we're constantly on conference call. And there's no way that we can actually survive in this working model without separating our space into, somewhat, different corner of the room. Regarding to, I think for me personally, the work model is as a producer being super realistic. I personally feel like I can adapt to either or, working remotely entirely or working on site. But I do see the possibilities of a hybrid model. I do see that this opportunity for us to revisit what is the goal and then what is the objective of game development and the collaboration, and then there's a lot of possibilities. So I think like personally it's really to look into, if you're going to support on both of that work environment, what does that mean for organization, and then what do you need to prepare or learn from? I think these are more like, being a producer, you just kind of have to think like, oh, so how do we even run stand up now? Like, how do we check in on everyone's progress? And then keeping it in a much more sort of fair and consistent experience for your developer across, all the spectrum of the working scenario. I think that's something, at least for me, I'm looking into that. And until we have some kind of solution, it's going to be really hard to, support the team and having the best experience. But I think we can get there. Yeah.
You brought up a really good point. I mean, I'm on the developer side as well, and sometimes it's hard to get teams to think as external dev as part of their team because they're not on site. And I think having this pandemic has definitely, changed perspectives and point of views on that. Christy, can you actually give a little insight? Like, do you think things have gotten better on the vendor side because of the pandemic?
In terms of business?
Of like, in terms of like almost like integrating your teams with the developer, like because you like beforehand, like you're basically the only remote team, like say for a developer, and now that the pandemic's happened, everybody is remote. So do you think like maybe like scheduling or the processes have improved at all because of this?
I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. I think for the teams internally, like Lois was saying, it's a lot harder because you can't stand behind someone's screen and look at their work and give feedback. So like Lois was saying, you have to schedule everything. And I think we have a lot of young artists. I think they're really missing the social aspect of being in the studio. I mean, it's a great energy. So, from their perspective, I think it's been really challenging. From my perspective, in terms of, schedule and stuff, because I am dealing with a lot of different time zones, my early morning is very intense. And then I often have late night calls. So the afternoon is, a less intense period for me. So I've been able to take that some time in the afternoon to go for a walk or go get groceries if I need to, or something else. So working from home has been, better for me from a schedule perspective. But I think it's probably been difficult for the artists. Now, they can also structure their time how they see fit as well. So if they're nighttime people, as long as they get their work done, they can structure their day, in whatever way is best for them. So that provides some freedom. But I do think that, stand-ups and things like that, it presents a lot of challenges to not be in the studio.
Right. Yeah, especially with people who are artists, like creativity feeds off creativity. Like just being in like completely encompassed in that, I think helps people with their creative side and creating new things for the games and such. So I bet a lot of us are missing that aspect of it. So, reflecting on the past like 14 months, can each of you give like one negative and one positive that has happened, like a lesson learned, like one negative lesson that you had to learn like the hard way, and then one positive lesson you learned throughout pandemic? And Lois, we'll start with you.
Oh, let's see. The positive, I think the positive is something kind of like sort of a general things that I'm seeing, at least among my colleagues and people around me, is the better intention of understanding. So one of this thing is really interesting is, when we talk about building a working culture and then, really supporting that diversity understanding and then including people who are different. This is one of the really big learning for us to, there's so much more personal side of the things kind of evolve and then also expose in front of your professional sort of territory. And I think this really put us into a very different way of thinking, because your team in such a different level compared to you only encounter in the office. And then because of the distance, I also have teams that, they just do better in person communication. They understand each other better. And now we're going through this, like, is your microphone on? Are you muted? And then what's going on? The level of patience and the level of understanding really, really challenge everyone and then really push forward. So I think that's really a bigger sort of, broader stroke of the positive side. I think the negative side is, I think the people element that need to pass through digital format definitely becoming different level of challenges for different individual. So, I think it's like everyone kind of have a different sort of sort of like the level of adoption for technology. I have many days that I have to be sitting in front of the computer, in front of camera for 10 hours back to back, zero bio break. And that is very, very stressful. I have folks that talks to me about, I'm very overwhelmed with all the different chat on Slack and I cannot comprehend all the information. I have, some of the more individual, like also younger developer, they're like, we love all the chat that happens all the time. And I just pop in and pop out. But I feel lonely because I'm living by myself. My bedroom is my office. And then there's not a lot of room for me to, expand myself. I can't learn from watching people. So that challenges that what we initially expected with the human interaction, the quality of communication, and then how you transform into going through technology that has been ongoing. I would say, like, if you as an individual couldn't solve that is such a negative thing. And also, I think it's just a bigger challenge or a bigger hill to climb at the moment for almost everyone in different angle. Yeah.
Yes, like Zoom fatigue is real. So we're actually nearing the end of our panel, and we're going to end on a high note. So I'm going to ask each panelist and like guys got to be kind of quick on this one. What is better than before? So what has happened, or what going forward, like what is better than before? Like, so before COVID and now, like what has improved? Priscilla, we'll go with you.
Yeah, I mean, I would say on a personal level, people seem to care more actually about your colleagues. We're always very, asking, how are you? How are you today? And how are you feeling? Hang in there, right? Especially at the beginning. So I feel like people are more caring and thoughtful towards each other. And even Lionbridge also as an organization really focusing on mental health. How are you guys doing? Getting active, all these different ways to try to keep everyone's mood up. So I would say the caring.
Great. Christy?
On a global level, I would say, the industry is booming. We were very fortunate to work in an industry that could work remotely. So, for example, our sister companies do a lot of visual effects for live action movies and television, and they were completely shut down because live action wasn't filming for such a long time, and it really hurt them. So, I was very, very grateful for the fact that we were in an industry where we could work from home, and honestly, you know, the games industry has only grown and become more successful in the pandemic. So I think it's been good for our business, and there's never been more work out there. In fact, the hardest thing, I'm just going to tie it in with this question number 3 here, the hardest thing has been recruitment. Um, it's been really hard to, without being able to really do recruitment drives and things like that, it's been hard to recruit, and it's been hard to onboard new talent without being able to have them on site. So figuring out how to train remotely and things like that has been challenging. But from a work perspective, business is booming.
Lastly, Lois. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I just realized that. Sorry. I
A
think
part of it.
I think the positive thing is, I think because there are so much more opportunity for the game industry, I think it changes, how do I say this? Like, even though with all the chaos, all the changes that I'm seeing with among all my developers, there's also a sense of anchoring because you have something to focus on. Many people tell me that, you know, even though a lot of things around us is really chaotic, but at least I have my work, I can center myself, I know what I need to focus on in my life. I think this is something that I can see people outside of this industry may have a little bit different level of anxiety that they need to deal with. On the other hand, like, at least for me, personal level, my skin is like better than ever. My health is definitely improving because I think there is a lot of different pocket of like time and sort of the mentality change. It really helped you to focus a lot of things more pure in life. So I think that's just different kind of, blessing, I suppose.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right. Well, thank you, panelists. We do have a couple questions, so you guys can just ping in when you want to answer. So the first one is, the increased demand for games and external development in the pandemic is undeniable. Do you believe there could be a post-pandemic exodus? So do you think after this pandemic, it's all going to go down? Or do you think we're going to continue this need for external development?
I'm going to say first. I think the changes actually is not really directly related to COVID. I think COVID opens up the opportunity for us to collaborate with external developer and then finding talent and resource in much more creative way. But as an industry, do we see any of our player wanted to have less content? Do they want to wait for longer for the new title to show up? The answer probably is pretty obvious. And then I think after pandemic, it's more about how do we make this more smart? How do we collaborate with external smarter? And then how do we make our sort of collaboration more effective? I think the demand is always going to go up, but I think the approach is going to be the next thing that we wanted to maybe focus on and look into.
Okay, next question is, I know it's this is from Patricia. I know it's a great challenge to adapt from this new way of working, but how about the people who are being hired during the pandemic? Do you have any tip or advice? Chrissy, you said you're having, like you're recruiting, but you also were hiring. So any tips or advice on how to hire during the pandemic?
Be creative and talk to the current employees to see if they have referrals. The standard way of just like putting a post on LinkedIn and seeing if, people apply, I think is not doing it anymore. So what we've been talking about a lot is how can we be creative? How can we, tap our employees to refer people? Do they know of people out there that would be great for or our organization that they can go in and talk to and see if they are looking to make a change? So I think our advice would be creative and think outside of the box.
Great. And then our third question is, I know it's a great challenge to adapt from this new way of working. Oh, sorry, that's repeat. Do you feel that the home office has improved the way you approach your job or career in any way?
I think we kind of already talked about that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of touched on that. So now we're like, those are the three that were typed in. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to put it in the chat.
I actually
And
wanted
we
to
answer. Oh, yeah.
respond about the getting hired or hiring people during the pandemic, because I was the first person joining my studio in a remote setting, and then from me being the first and until now, we have about like onboarding about 20 people in the studio, and we didn't really stop or slowing down of what we planned to do with the pandemic and everything. And then I think one of the things I actually recently have a lot of discussion with some of my folks in the team is we do need to change the way we communicate, and then also just be, especially I talk to some of the more junior artists, because some of them, this is their first job, and then you immediately being put into a remote situation. So the learning and training aspect for you is going to be really, really different. It almost feel like you're taking online classes. And what is the most important thing when you can look and learn, watch and learn, and then do by trial and error kind of process change. I think the most important thing is you need to look at your motivation, because you need to be even more disciplined than ever. You need to ask much more questions in order for your leads or directors to give you instructions, or they can understand what you need help for. And I always tell the team is like, I don't know what you don't know. So even you feel shy about it and then you're not sure because of the remote situation, one thing is, don't focus on people may see you differently or feel like you don't know what you're doing or you're not, competent of doing something. Instead of focusing on, be very clear about what you need help for, and then what others can help you to improve or advance to allow you to contribute to this teamwork better. So there's a lot of that proactiveness really need to come from the individual, because the way how the communication structure change, people wouldn't really know until you speak up. And I think this is like one of really interesting changes. There's no one going to drive by and say, hey, do you need something? How are you doing? That opportunity definitely reduced, unfortunately, even though we don't want that to really get lost in this remote working situation, but it did. So I have this sort of routine with my team is like, I will check in with you, usually an average, like with the quality conversation, 2 to 3 weeks. So within those time, it's on you to talk to me and see what is happening or what do you need, or any kind of support that you need. So the proactiveness really changed. The market is more competitive. Talent can come from anywhere. So if you're a job seeker, then you gotta be even more proactive, and then do outreach, be out there, because it's a very different level of play field, in my opinion.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Like, it's very different, especially hiring and finding that talent that fits with your team. And then also too, like being remote, like if when you do that hire that person, like are they going to fit with your team remotely? And also once we all get in a person again, like are they going to mesh well? Google, half of their interviewing is just seeing the chemistry of working with a team. And, it's kind of hard to gauge that on Zoom. So we have about 4 minutes left. So any closing thoughts from our panelists? We all good? All right. Well, yeah, I just want to thank everyone for attending our panel and, just sending best wishes to everyone's well-being. And I hope everyone stays safe. And, it seems that there's light at the end of the tunnel now. Things seem to be opening up for some here and there. So hopefully in the future, we all can be together in person. I know myself, like I attended BIG 2 years ago and I absolutely loved it. So I'd love to be able to go in person again. Brazil is such a wonderful country and I had a blast. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to my panelists and thank you, BIG.
Thank you so much, Cassie, for moderating this panel so well. And thank you as well, Chrissy, Lois, and Priscilla. That was great. I hope that next year, on the next big festival, you're all here in Brazil. Who knows? Thank you all once again.
Big Festival 2021, the biggest games festival in Latin America.